Way back in 2005, two brothers set off on a road trip that would save the world and change television.
The Elvis brothers, Presley and Costello.
What in the world? For 15 seasons and 327 episodes, Supernatural took audiences on a wild ride of family, fate, and faith with a rocking soundtrack and a seriously cool car.
But that was then, Bobo, and this is now. And yes, the show has quote-unquote ended, but we're not quite done with the journey.
No, we're not.
And that's why we're watching it all over again, or for Rob and me, for the first time,
That's right.
diving deep into every episode of Supernatural with the fine folks who made it. And we're taking you along for the ride.
Whether you like it or not. I'm Rob Benedict. I played Chuck Shirley, a.k.a. God.
Spoiler.
Yeah, it is a bit of a spoiler, but hey, spoilers are fair game here.
Fine. And I'm Richard Speight Jr., and I played the Trickster, also known as the Archangel Gabriel, and I did a little bit of Loki work in there.
Okay, you know we're running out of time.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about the entire series, so whatever we say, accept it. You've been warned.
So buckle up and settle in.
Because this, my friend, is Supernatural, then and now.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Benedict.
And my name is Richard Speight.
And we're talking about Season 2, Episode 8.
You're damn right we are, Robbie.
And it's called Crossroad Blues.
Man, who doesn't love the blues? I guess people who don't like the blues, but other people love it.
Or Crossroads. A lot of people like Crossroads, too.
It's different traffic, you know, when you're trying to get
Yeah.
somewhere and you hit a crossroads, you're like, God damn.
That's true. What's the thing where you go around, like they have them in England?
Bridge?
Roundabout.
Roundabout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were going to
Roundabout.
call this Roundabout Blues, but then they changed.
Were they?
Uh-huh. But we'll get into that with fun facts later. But for now, let's get into the summary. The brothers go to investigate the death of an architect. Who said
An
he was-
architect, they should never die.
I know. Death of an Architect, by the way, is a great.
There's nothing worse.
Sounds like
wait.
great book.
Death of an architect. It's like Murder on the Orient Express.
Exactly.
Only a lot more boring.
Right. So this architect said he was chased by a big, black, vicious dog before dying. They learned that the architect was an overnight success. They investigate a separate sighting of a black dog by a doctor who is missing and presumed dead. Sam Dean learned that the doctor was an overnight success too, and that the doctor and the architect both have a connection to Lloyd's Tavern. Just a sweet tavern out in the middle of nowhere. Sam and Dean find Lloyd's in Mississippi and discover it is at a crossroads.
Oh, no. Meaning like it's that tavern needs to make a decision for its life? Like it's like,
Yeah. It doesn't know. Does it want to go public?
does
or
it go
stay
to college or does it
Little
stay at
old
tavern?
Lloyd's. So it's at a crossroads, a site commonly used to make deals with demons.
Right.
The boys realize that the black dogs are coming to collect souls for people that make deals with demons. Dean recalls Robert Johnson, the legendary bluesman who supposedly made a deal with the devil to become the greatest bluesman in the early 20th century at a crossroad.
Oh.
But the brothers believe that the demon is back and is making deals with people, granting their desires in exchange for their souls.
Bummer.
Sam and Dean follow the clues and track down George Darrow, an artist who summoned the demon and did a deal at the crossroads 10 years ago. They learn that after doing the deal with George, the demon stuck around Lloyd's and did more deals. George sends them to Evan Hudson. The boys visit Evan. He believes they are demons coming to collect. The brothers learn that Evan sold his soul to save his wife from cancer. Sam stays back to protect Evan. Dean goes to the crossroads and summons the demon. He captures the demon in a devil's trap. The demon tries to toy with Dean and tells him that his father gave his soul to save him.
Oh.
Dean starts to exorcise the demon. He does a deal to save Evan in exchange for him to release the demon. Evan is saved. The demon is gone. Sam worries that Dean might do a deal to save Dad from hell. Crossroad Blues. I really liked this episode a lot. I love the story of Robert Johnson at the Crossroads. There was a movie when we were in the 80s
Oh, Steve Vai played Satan.
called Crossroads, where Steve Vai played Satan and of course Ralph Macchio played the kid.
Right.
And anyway, I was always fascinated with this story, and I love the music of Robert Johnson, and I love the way they did it, the flashbacks. Yeah, I really liked it, and the deal with the demon and her revealing to Dean about his dad. What'd you think?
I thought it was great. I thought, the actor who played Robert Johnson, who we get to interview in this episode, he did a great job. He was so grounded and good as Robert Johnson. And I thought that Steve Boyum directed the daylights out of it. I thought it was a really interesting episode. To your point, I love the flashback element. I thought they were able to create a different cinematic look for the flashbacks that were really cool. and sort of elevated the whole tone of the episode. And I thought it was cool. I guess my one hang up would be that the Evan, the guy that they like are struggling to save at the end, I didn't find him all that compelling. I thought the artist was cool, like the artist guy they interviewed and who sort of said, I made a deal with the devil and I'm going to finish this painting and I'm going to die. That guy was cool. And that's kind of a cool tortured soul storyline. I thought the person they actually end up saving and doing the deal with the devil for, I didn't find it all that compelling. That was, as a character, not necessarily the actor per se, just the person they found, the written character itself. I didn't think it was all that compelling for that part.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I was almost anticipating that he was going to be an overnight success at something, but really his whole thing was just it's not to be a better artist or a better at your job. You're just making a deal. It's like, what do you want more than anything? And what he wanted was to save his wife, and that is an admirable thing. And so writing wise, that was good writing. To you know what I mean? You don't want him to suffer.
No, it made sense that they would sort of go, well, this guy obviously didn't do it for ego. You know what I mean? He did it for a morally justifiable reason, at least on paper.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not the cancer part. I don't know, man. Did you find it that compelling, that part of it? Or maybe it was just me?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. At the time, it didn't bother me. I was more compelled with the demon, with Dean, and the way they sort of cut back and forth. And I liked that they were sort of, it was a good play on upping the stakes, and they salt around them and they're trying to get, escape the demon while he's making the deal. I thought that was well done. But I see what you mean about, weren't as compelled with that character.
I see your point. I think maybe I'm being overly critical for the sake of a review. Like I didn't really think about it that much at the time. I just, in retrospect, thought about it.
Right.
It's a good episode. Solid episode the whole way through.
Good solid episode. I'm going to go ahead and give it a full beard.
I'm going to give it what's called the Benedict Plus. It's a Benedict without the sophisticated gray dotted through it, a classy dye job.
Classy dye job.
So not a crappy dye job like you did the patchy Benedict, not that.
Right.
It's a Benedict Plus, which is a good solid episode. It's not a full beard like perfect Chris Stapleton, but it's solid, man.
Yeah.
Solid through and through.
All right. Well, we've got a couple of great interviews in this podcast.
Wait, more than one? We have more than one interview?
Yes.
Oh.
But let's start with the first. Steve Boyum, the director, directed 9 episodes of Supernatural, including a couple that I was in. Currently, he's directing a show called The Boys
on Amazon Prime. Great show.
He also directed episodes of Black Sails, Revolution, Hawaii Five-0, Criminal Minds, and Lethal Weapon.
Amazing.
He got to start doing stunt work in films such as Apocalypse Now and The Blues Brothers.
2 classics, 2 massive classics.
Yeah. So excited to talk to him. Please welcome Steve Boyum.
So, Steve, for starters, thank you for doing our podcast. Thank you for being here. Question we ask everybody for the first time we interview them. How did you get involved in Supernatural? How did you come to be on the show?
I think it really came out of my agent just doing what agents are supposed to do, quotation marks. And because I didn't know Eric. In fact, I knew no one on the show. And, when was this? In 2006, right? I think it was
2006, 2007, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of came out of the blue, and then I came and met the boys as they were teenagers, in their 20s, but
emotional teenagers.
Oh yeah, and I think Kim Manners probably, I'm sure, vouched for me when my name came up because Kimmy and I went back into the 80s when Kim was an AD still, and we'd been friends for 20 years before I came to do Supernatural, and he was kind of the visual god of that show to begin with.
Yeah.
So I think that helped.
And you did stunt work. You used to do stunt work, and you'd done some acting work as well, right?
Yeah, I would say my stunt pedigree is far greater than my acting one. The acting one fell more out of, okay, well, we want to see the guy fall off the second-story balcony and then get up and say something versus going, we want Shakespeare recited here.
Right.
But yeah, no, I started out, I was actually as a kid, I guess what would be considered today in all 3 sports, a professional skier, motocross racer, and surfer.
Oh,
so, growing up and bouncing between those sports was kind of a natural entree into the stunt business. But my mother was Irene Dunn's stand-in, Jean Tierney's stand-in, became an actress in her own right in the 40s, did a couple of war propaganda films during World War II. Her aunt and grandmother were both in the industry, and all of them had, well, her mother, I mean, my aunt and grandmother, her mother, in fact, was Otto Preminger's secretary, Gregory Radoff's secretary at Fox. And so I grew up hearing all of these stories, but they had all three long left the business. So as a little kid, I was out making monster movies with my 8mm camera that they gave me when I was about 7, 8 years old, and, trying to splice film together and do that. But had pretty much given up on it and, was just really into my sports. And, there was no one to help me get into the business. But when I was teaching skiing in Mammoth in 1970, I came across a couple of really famous stunt guys. And, that was like, okay, cool, maybe I can get in this way. In fact, I did, and started off, my first movie was Rollerball, and was lucky enough to do Apocalypse Now. I actually did play a formal role in Apocalypse. I'm one of the two surfers that Duvall sends out in the water to surf or fight.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And geez, worked on films like, I'm the guy that gets nailed in the forehead in Lethal Weapon 2 by Danny Glover, so I come in and attack him.
Right.
I guess that was kind of acting.
Yeah.
And just got to work over the years with so many great directors, cameramen. Tony Scott, one of my heroes. I did a number of films with Tony.
What did you do with Tony Scott?
I did Days of Thunder.
Unbelievable.
And after that, after I'd already launched my directing, and I had a transitional period in the 90s when I was a director of photography and director. During that time, when I kind of walked away from the stunt business, I got a call and the opportunity to go drive NASCARs at Daytona. So it's like, okay, well, I'll put the directing thing on hold and go drive race cars. And got to know Tony on that. He then brings me in on True Romance to do the fight sequence. And now I'm not even thinking about doing stunts anymore. And I think that Tony has reached out to call me to come to work to hang out and smoke cigars with him because I'm a good guy. But in fact, it was that he figured that I was one of the guys, from what he knew about me on Days of Thunder, that would pretty much do anything and not question it. I doubled James Gandolfini doing the fight with Patricia Arquette.
Unbelievable.
That's an incredible fight.
Of course, having the aerosol spray can with the lighter launched right into my face without anything but fire gel on it, which Tony found greatly amusing. And it actually worked and didn't burn me up. But so always a big fan of Tony's. And, frankly, I have to confess that when you guys reached out to me to do the podcast, and I remember Crossroad Blues to be like really a cool script, and the experience, I thought it was, in hindsight, kind of a good show. In fact, I did watch it. I rewatched it in preparation for this. And I was telling Kripke this last night or night before last while we were shooting. It was really kind of depressing watching it because I now that I look at it, it's one of the best things I directed, I think, even to this day. And I was telling Kripke, I said, I think I might have lost a beat. I think maybe you got me in my prime back then. But, just a, kind of really forward-looking kind of style of filmmaking, which I think drove the crew kind of crazy a little bit because, there was a style that Kim had set, which was incredible. And I used that style, but I kind of brought in some things that I wanted to try with it a little bit. And, and I think it pays off. I think it looks like a great Supernatural episode and kind of, much like the rest of them. But, looking back on it, there was stuff that I did that I'm going, why aren't I doing that anymore? Just with camera placement and everything else. And
well, let's talk specifically about that, because the episode's fresh in your mind. Like, what is it you saw in that episode that you thought, oh, that was me pushing the envelope, or that was something unique?
Probably more, like the cool low angles and Serge Leducier is just such an incredible cameraman.
Yeah.
I think it was just more about kind of I was channeling Tony Scott a little bit more in those days than I do now. And so I was trying to bring in a bit of Man on Fire kind of vibe to it. And mixing long lenses with super wide lenses up close, low angles. Kripke has always been incredible with casting. The cast on it was so good, and the boys are so good that really, no matter what you do, it's going to be interesting. The writing is great. Yeah, I just think stylistically it was a little bit more. And Kripke's answer to when I said it was a little bit depressing, he goes, "Nah, think about it. You've done so much better since, and you're still doing great stuff on this show." So maybe it was more about just, I thought that looking back 20 years, I was a little afraid to watch it, thinking, okay, well, it's going to be crap. And it really held up. I mean, I think a couple of my favorite scenes were certainly the opener in the Blues Club with
Monde Byrd.
Lamont, who was fantastic.
Yeah.
And, I talked to him early when we first cast him. And it was, I'd put this out on the bullet points for casting to get somebody that could play the guitar. Because the last thing I wanted to do was, a lot of films you see people, I wanted to really make sure that, I could do shots on his hands while he was acting and he's playing.
Sure.
And I don't know that he was a very accomplished guitar player, but I think that he worked really hard at learning how to perform that song, because I sent him the music. I sent him the recording, and I think he did a really good job. And, you could still on network television smoke, and having the cigarette just was like really cool, I thought, looking back in hindsight. For example, in that stuff, I'm not, I don't spend a lot of time trying to get is, I guess now would feel a little bit dated, but, shooting down through the overhead fan, which was kind of an homage to Apocalypse Now in the opening scene with Sheen in the hotel room. Right. And just little things like that, I still will tend to do the punctuation points, like the cigarette hitting the ground, or somebody tapping a desk, and that I still try to do. But another cool scene that I saw that I liked, that I don't do a lot anymore, which is shooting through foreground elements, which I think over the years I've kind of felt got a little bit dated with, some of the cop procedural shows. But the scene with George Darrow, when they go to him and he's got the goofer dust by the front, lining the front door, that was kind of a full-blown Tony Scott channeling type of coverage. And I thought it really worked. And I worked with Jerry Weinig, the production designer. So, I had him build that wall with the slats in it so that I could, do the dolly shots through it. So it was kind of like a pre-designed thinking of how I was going to shoot it before, so I could work it out with the art department. And maybe I'm feeling less and less that I do that now. That, in the last 10 years, I think at times I try to be a little free form and, let the actors inform me, get in the room, rehearse, let the performances kind of inform what I'm doing, and not let camera craziness get in the way of the performance. But, there are some scenes that I still go into knowing that there's some cool style things that we can do. But also too, one of the learning experiences I've had was about how to shoot Supernatural was when we did Sam with Vincent Gale. I forget the character's name, but he's the one who had the wife who had terminal cancer, and he sold his soul. That scene was fun because in the way I had thought to do it was to have Sam start laying goofer dust all over and let him create. Well, let me put it this way. Jared informed me as soon as we started dealing with goofer dust. He's like, "Boyum, we've dealt with dust and crap like this before." And he goes, "And this can take all day long and it'll never be in the fucking movie. So let's start with this much of it here and I'll finish it." And I'm like, the movie's ruined. But in fact, that was, that's the way to do it, So even though they were just young 20-somethings, they both taught me a lot. And I don't know
that's
if
cool.
over the years they got anything from me, but yeah.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
The other scene that I think I really liked a lot was Dean's exorcism with Dean's demon. She was fantastic. That whole thing I thought I liked the circular dolly track around the water tower. I remember that was a royal pain in the ass because the circular dolly track and the water tower, the diameters didn't quite match.
Oops.
And Brad Creaser was the A camera operator who has become a very dear friend over the years, was about at that time of the episode, it might have been day 6 or 7, had about enough of my ass. And I had about enough of his ass. And, it was like, I'll never do this show again. And
hilarious.
It was one of those moments. And, I came back again and did the second one the next season. And it became a love fest for 4 years with all these guys. So,
yeah. This was the first of 9 episodes that you directed for the series.
Yeah, 9. Yeah.
Yeah. For this episode, which was a great first episode for you, you never see the hellhounds. That's something that's sort of recreated with sound and, reactions and the effects from the claws. Was that a conversation, whether or not you're going to see them? Was there ever talk about using real dogs?
No, I think from the beginning, I don't think Eric ever wanted to see the dogs. Certainly the shadows going through the windows in the first Robert Johnson scene, honestly, it's a great question, because I don't think ever we intended to have real dogs. I know that when Dean and Vince Gale are in the house in this Goofer Dust Circle, we had always envisioned just the claws. And I think that's pretty much, those were Kripke rules from the beginning, I believe. But that, in fact, for the fans that watch the show, how silly it can become and how much it takes as an actor to go, okay, well, there's nothing in the room, but in fact, what's supposed to be in the room is something that's going to kill me, and it has to end up being scary. So you're performing the scene, and at times everybody's cracking up in the middle of the shot. Cut, gotta go again. But I think Jared at that point, both guys had gotten pretty good at knowing the show and knowing what it took to make it, cool and scary and everything else. So, but I don't believe we ever had the dogs in mind. Well, I'll give you a good story about Dean, about Jensen. The longer that those guys did the show, the first few years, you'd lay out a scene that would be easy to cover. But they'd want to, of course, go, no, I want to go over to this side of the room. I'm going to go to that table over there. So you didn't argue with them. It just made you take longer to shoot the scene. By the time I went back in season 10, Jensen's instincts were to go one place in a room, but he quickly looked at me and he goes, but if I go over there, is this going to take an extra hour? And I said, yeah. And he goes, where do you want me to go?
Yeah.
That's the voice of experience at this point, right?
Yeah.
And now both these guys are just incredible filmmakers themselves. So
yeah.
It's great. It's great that when you're actors, and to your point, Jensen and Jared are now creators on their own right. But just looking at them as actors in the show, it's great when they have that awareness, because then everybody's on the same team. You know what I mean? Like everybody's fighting the same fight.
Right. And I got to tell you, by season 3, season 4, they were so good at understanding that show and what the audience expected, what they needed to do to make it look good. And I think that you guys probably know, working with them, Richard, especially, when you're on the show, they're going to hang out in their trailers and have fun. And when they, you might wait on them a little bit because they're doing something, and then they roll out to the set and the crew sits around waiting. The one thing they always did, and it was, you could set a clock by it, when they got to the set, it would be like one take and you'd go, I don't know if you can do it any better than that. Yeah. They never struggled with the scene. They knew the scene inside and out by the time they shot it. Dialogue for them was nothing. For them to blow a line was so rare, or not to remember a word or a line. I always was impressed about that with them. Like I said, a lot of times you're waiting and you're going, what, I'd love to get out of here. But they come out and just nail it every time. I mean,
I always feel like that's your time trade-off with them. The time, like, they'll take their time coming out, but they'll waste no time shooting the scene. So versus an actor who's like looking through their sides going, no, where are we? Hold on. Let me review this real quick. None of that. Right. They don't even, I'm pretty sure there was many a time where they didn't have sides in their back pocket. They came out just
prepared,
ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know 15. That they ever referred to sides.
I don't think
they might have been
either.
a rehearsal,
Yeah.
But, you never, that you're absolutely right.
And through until the end, they were that way all the way through season 15. They never really, other shows, they might peel off at a certain, start phoning it in. But these guys, they brought it till the end.
They did. I mean, it's Kripke and I were just talking about the viewership data on the show. And, I mean, it's astronomical. I think it's still, Krip was saying that, to this day, it's still in like the top 10 of minutes of broadcast and eyeballs on it.
So now listen, when you're in this episode of the show, there's, we're doing flashbacks, right? So this is a dumb question maybe, but I don't know how monitors and everything worked back then. Were you setting a LUT or a look back then for the flashbacks that you'd be able to see on a monitor? Or was it not? So you couldn't see it in the monitor?
No, Sayers, as directing, Sayers rides in the van with you to work every day. And, he had presupposed looks, we talked about looks, but no, that was well before, I think, I'm trying to think of how they colored then. It might have, it was on film. So
right?
You were doing it in the lab and then sitting down with a colorist at the end working on a, negative and film. So no, what we saw then in those days was a pretty rudimentary video playback or video assist. Certainly not what we have now. Now it's like sitting in your living room watching a high def television on the set. But, Sayers, I think, had looks that he wanted. And we'd always talked, I think Serge and I talked about, the flashbacks having a very washed out, desaturated vibe to them. In fact, I'm sure of that. We talked about the look of the show as we were doing it, but I think we established what we wanted it to look like. But looking at, when you're working in the editing room on that show, now you're looking at just one light daily transfer.
Right. So you didn't know, I suppose, aside from this desaturation, it had a completely different look, almost like there were filters that were making the lights bleed differently and things like that. And I imagine that's all stuff that you guys game planned in advance of doing.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything that I really think the only thing we did was desat it. And frankly, I think that now that I'm recalling, I think we might even have talked about, are these flashbacks black and white? And, that was kind of the look we were trying to, I think, go for.
Right.
But give it a bit of, some warm density to it, but, pretty desatted. So
really awesome.
Yeah, it was a good looking show. And I mean, even to this day, like I said, watching it the other weekend, it just was, it looks so good.
Yeah. We've had the same experience going back and rewatching them, for this podcast. Like you go, oh, wow, it's 2007, 2006, 2007, and it looks great. It's a good looking show. And,
it holds up really well.
It really holds up.
I keep thinking it must have been the coolest looking thing on that network at the time. It's just so much
very,
denser in its
very cinematic
contrast and everything. It's just great.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to, honestly, there's so many shows now that are the genre on television, and I don't know that they look better or doing anything more groundbreaking than what Supernatural provided. I think that, not that anybody wants to admit it in the, in the cocktail class of film, that they actually are relying upon a little CW show for inspiration.
Right.
I suspect they are. I mean, I don't know anybody that has seen Supernatural that didn't think it was the coolest thing, and still to this day, it was, and I'm so, I don't know. I hope that they're able to, with Jensen's new show with the
Winchesters,
with the Winchesters, with the prequel, that they're able to even outdo Supernatural, and make it for a new audience and make it as cool. But
well, that's a high bar, but I certainly hope they're able to at least get. Supernatural. I do think there's a little bit of a lightning in the bottle effect with Supernatural in terms of Jared and Jensen being who they are, Kripke's vision being what it is, and then the look being what it was, and the freedom they had to do what they had to do. I can only hope they're able to emulate that in some capacity in this next run. That's a hell of a task.
Yeah, it was a really good pilot. I read the pilot. Actually, Jensen and Daniil talked to me about doing the pilot, but they went a different direction. But looking at it and trying to envision how I would shoot that and try to make it as cool as Supernatural. So it wasn't just a casual read, but it runs a risk of being a really good show.
Good.
And with Jensen at, kind of in the, and I think he's really, from what, Kripke's been telling me, that he really is involved. And, I think he's such a smart filmmaker now that, the thing should be pretty damn good,
Yep.
So
that's great.
I'm hoping too.
Yeah. And what also was really kind of cool and inspiring about this whole show was this particular episode was just the legend and the myth around Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
And I think that before I did the show, I think I did a lot of research on Robert Johnson and kind of looked at how a lot of the mythology about him and trading off his soul. As I recall, I think that, when he was a kid, he'd moved he was born in Mississippi and it ended up in Memphis and then came back to Mississippi, Robinsonville or something. And, as a kid, he was a pretty good harmonica player. And I think that there was, some blues musician that was relatively famous that was in that town and knew him, as a kid who was I think he called him a pretty good harmonica player, mouth harp player, but an adequate guitar player. And then he disappears. And I think that's where some of the mythology comes in. God, he ends up in some other, in another town in Mississippi. And I guess he's running with another relatively famous blues guitar player that would go and practice in graveyards. Then he comes back to Robinsonville, and he's a really good guitar player. So, it's stuff like that opens up the mythology. And I think that his first wife that Robert Johnson had, she died in childbirth, but her parents accused him of, bringing about this whole thing because he was cursed by the devil for not playing spiritual music and playing blues. So there was so much mythology around this guy that, that with a great script and who wrote this one? Sarah Gamble?
Yes, Sarah Gamble. We're getting Sarah Gamble.
No, but the script was so good. And then when you looked at the, the Robert Johnson story and just listened to the music, Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, Keith Richards, all of them in different interviews have said that Robert Johnson was, bar none, the best blues guitar player. He influenced so much of modern music and modern blues, especially for the English, the British Revolution, pop revolution, back Beatles. I think Beatles, George Harrison even was probably a fan, but and John Lennon. But, there was so much mythology around him that you had the supernatural mythology that Kripke had created. And it was just a lucky episode to get for the first one I did.
Yeah.
Because it had the built-in supernatural and then the whole myth around the Robert Johnson of
backstory.
It all. So,
yeah.
And I don't even remember, there was an interesting scene that kind of took me by surprise when the wife of Vincent Gale, when she's leaving to go pick the kids up or go to the market. And, it's a sweet scene and she's asking him what's wrong. And he's been hearing the sounds of the dogs outside as he's working in his office. And when she walks away and then turns back to him and her face contorts, I didn't remember that at all. It kind of made me start a little bit.
That's a good, legit scare in that episode. Yeah. You do not see that one coming.
You don't see it coming. And, that was early on. And, visual effects now you can do total face replacements on people, on actors. Stuff has gotten so rudimentary for them. I know it's complicated still, but then all of this stuff was really not being done a lot. So that was like, how did we do that? I think it was all she had to do was cock her head and open her mouth.
Yeah.
You got to love how cutting edge not only was Supernatural in its look, but in its execution of things like visual effects. It was just so cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Steve, thank you so much for being a part of this.
Much.
I mean,
yeah.
You got 9 more or 8 more under your belt to talk to us about. So we're hoping you'll come back and have this conversation again when your next one pops up.
Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Tell Kripke we say hey.
I will. Bye.
Ahoy. Rich Spade here. Hope you're enjoying the episode. But we got to pull over for a second for some messages. Hey, this is Richard Spate. You know what? It's 2024. It's a brand new year, and I bet you made some New Year's resolutions, and I bet one of them was to eat healthier. Well, you can get cranking on that resolution right now, my friend, with Factor. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in the new year. Skip the grocery stores, the prep work, the cooking fatigue. I'm getting tired just talking about it. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. With over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, and veggie, and more, plus over 55 weekly add-ons, you will have a ton of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart this resolution off right. Forget frantic lunch prep and rush dinner making. That stinks. Factor's 2-minute meals, yes, I said 2 minutes, are your secret weapon in the new year. You get to fuel up fast with restaurant-quality meals all delivered right to your door. It doesn't get any easier than that. And Factor now offers loads of snack options like breakfast, smoothies, juices, snacks, and more to keep you going no matter what's on the schedule. So I know what you're asking, Rich, how do I tap into this Factor magic? You head to factormeals.com/SPNTAN50 and use code SPNTAN50 to get 50% off. That's a lot off. That's code SPNTAN50 at factormeals.com/SPNTAN50 for 50% off. Make that resolution happen now and make it happen at a discount. Fantastic food that's healthy and delicious and delivered right to my door. Now that is how you start the new year off right. Thanks for listening. Now, back to the episode.
That was great. So great to talk to Steve.
Legend, man. He's been around forever. He's done everything. What hasn't he done? Name one thing he hasn't done.
I can't.
Exactly.
So nice. And next up, we have one of my favorite characters in the episode. Monde Byrd played Robert Johnson in the episode, and he's
so good.
Yeah, he's appeared in 911, This Is Us, Bones, Mad Men, and Grey's Anatomy.
Couple of hit shows on that roster right there,
Some hit shows, yeah. And today, he's on the Supernatural Then and Now podcast. Welcome, Monde Byrd. We're talking about Crossroads, and we're so fortunate to have Lamond on the show. Just jumping into it, did you know much about Robert Johnson and that whole story?
You know, I knew a lot about Robert Johnson. You know, it's so interesting. When I got the call for the audition, it made all the sense in the world. I'm a huge blues fan, have always been. You know, I love music, everything from, you know, Max Richter to Narda Wick. I mean, I listen to the gamut of music, you know?
Right. That's great.
And had been really in a deep blues phase at the time. So when I got the call saying that it was for specifically Robert Johnson, morning, day, and night, I was playing his music like crazy.
That's crazy.
That's ironic.
When I got the call, I knew, not to sound overconfident, but I said, "Oh, I'm going to book this.
This is mine." Yeah.
I'm not a huge, guitar player, but I knew a few blues riffs, and I said, if I just work my ass off and prep, like I always do, the spirit of the blues will carry me the rest of the way through, and it sure enough did.
Well, you kind of answered a question that I was going to ask you, which is about your guitar playing, because in the few shots, they have of your hands, it looks like a guy who knows how to play guitar.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know if they just taught you like one move and you could fool us with it, or if you knew your way around the neck. It seemed like you do a little bit.
That's a great question. Actually, Warner Brothers, 16 years ago, was Warner Brothers, right? Warner Brothers, yes.
Yeah.
Paid for a guitar. Yeah, right. Paid for a guitar teacher to teach me the riff, the song that actually opens up the episode.
That's awesome.
Even though, so there's a little bit of editing that's, every time I watch, I'm like, oh, the fingers look a little off, but believe it or not, I'm playing the song.
That's season 2 preparation right there,
Dude,
Rich.
Rob, okay, so Rob is a musician, and Rob played a song in an episode years later, like season 13 or 14. Rob, they wouldn't have taught you to play that song.
Oh, man.
If
I was on my own. They never even asked me if I could play it. They're just like,
oh my God.
fix it in post.
Literally, Lamont, that is like you were there during the high times, man. Like guitar coach.
It was a good deal. I actually took it a step further because, like I said, I'm a huge blues fan, and just understanding what it meant to be a blues player in those days. I mean, you were always on the move, town to town, making money from street corners to juke joints. So I would literally take my guitar to, the Venice Beach area, Marina Del Rey, Santa Monica area with my fedora, and I would sit down and I would practice every little bit of that song and any of the riff that I knew. And individuals would pass by and listen and drop a couple of bucks in there sometimes. I mean, this was, pre-inflation, obviously. So
Wow.
spread around, but it was a really interesting experience.
You're a
Wow.
genius. Talk about figuring out how to monetize a role. That was, I got to do that, right?
Put it like that.
Yeah. Sometimes I do monologues on the corner just with a hat out.
I take my guitar and people give me money to go away. It's
well, they did have the Robert Johnson starting out. I mean, not they didn't give him money to go away, but he was not the kind of blues player, guitarist that he was obviously starting out. And Son House and Willie Brown basically would shoo him away, because he sounded so horrible, according to some historians.
Okay,
wow.
I'm going to ask a question that, they say never ask a question you don't know the answer to, but I don't know the answer to this one. Robbie, I don't know if you know the answer to this one, but why is this legend so persistent about Robert Johnson and making a deal with the Devil at the Crossroads? Just the song itself, or is it bigger than that?
I think just the legend itself. I mean, the fact that, and I'll let Lamont answer, but in my opinion, I think it's like he wrote songs about this. He actually got really good. He has the music is recorded. It sounds amazing. It feels like the legend is real.
Yeah, I mean, that I think definitely part of it, is that. But, just to, as you say, unpack it a little bit more, because it took him a year, I think a year and a half roughly, for him, according to some individuals like, the Son Houses and other musicians who were around at that time, to become this phenomenal guitarist. And as legend would said, he would go to graveyards and play, because I guess that was what his mentor told him. And I can't remember whether it was his uncle or just a family friend who kind of helped him along with learning the guitar. Said it was best to play in the graveyard at night, because the spirits would come to assist you with, learning how to play it, And
note to self, don't play in a graveyard at night. Good Lord.
Yeah,
I don't want the spirits showing up. Bye, spirits.
He did exactly that. But also,
wow.
I guess, according to what I remember, he had so much tragedy in his life that he kind of took on the persona of having made a deal with the devil as it pertains to losing a child and being dejected for playing the devil's music.
Right. You do such a terrific job in this episode. I love the work that you do in this. And it's, a lot of times, if someone comes in and they've got a couple of emotional scenes, it can go either way with some of the guest actors. You never know. And this show does such a great job of getting great guest stars. And you, honestly, it really is the through line of this episode. It's the spirit of this episode. And you could tell that you prepared and you were meant to play the role. When you do scenes like dying, that must have been really hard. Like, what went through that for you?
That is a great question. So Steve Boyum directed the episode.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I was hoping you asked that question. I remember we were coming up on that scene and the AD came, gave the warning. And I said, hey, can you ask Steve to come to the trailer? I just wanted to kind of talk for a minute. And I wanted to talk through that dying scene because I had a lot of ideas about it, how traumatic to portray it. And of course, I had my internal dialogue going as it pertains to what my character was dealing with. So I remember Steve knocked on the door, opened up the door, and I said, hey, I just wanted to talk about this dying scene. And I said, I kind of wanted to see how you envisioned it. And before I could even finish that, he said, how do you see it? And then before I could finish that, he said, how you see it is how I see it. And I remember that, that was such a moment for me as an actor, because a lot of times, of course, we prepare the hell out of things, right? And we show up, and as guest stars, we go, we on time, hit our marks, do the work, and then we're out of there, But I felt such a part of the episode. And also I felt a huge responsibility to bring justice to Robert Johnson's legacy. And to have a director willing to play like that, man, it was really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, I really saw it as almost a possession and internal feeding.
That's great directing, eh, Rich?
That speaks volumes to Steve Boyum. I mean, Steve Boyum is a legend. The man's been working nonstop since I was in knee pants and Rob was 40. But the thing about this interesting is, wow. This is what we do, Lamont. It's okay. We're friends.
I like Lamont goes,
wow.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of you guys, so you don't understand how many podcast episodes that I've listened to, and I'm always looking forward to the outtakes at the end.
But back to the Steve thing. Steve is a legend. I mean, he's considered a bit of a cowboy in that he's really good with stunt stuff. He was the PD on Black Sails. You know, he comes from the stunt world into directing. And the reason why I bring that up is it's cool because I've never been directed by him. So, Lamont, you're talking about a director I've never worked with. Rob, have you?
Yeah, twice.
Okay.
I directed a couple of my episodes.
Okay,
yeah.
so you know already, but to me, that's a really cool, to the point that we were saying about TV, about being a guest star. Not every TV director is actor friendly. Yes. A lot of times they've got their battle plan, and that's their battle plan. I'm not criticizing them. That's just how they approach their work. It's nice that Steve was not that guy in that moment, because it seems like that moment deserved the kind of director that Steve revealed himself to be, an actor friendly director.
Absolutely. And you left out Apocalypse Now. He did Sunset Apocalypse Now, which is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Favorite
wow.
Yeah.
In one of the coolest scenes ever. I mean, like the surfing stuff. You know, You're like, what a legend.
Wow, that's amazing. What did we do you think that he knew
Tom Wright?
Tom Wright?
I can't imagine whether they knew each other from that or something else. I can't imagine those two did not cross paths. But I would wonder, because apparently Tom Wright, who also directed a lot of Supernaturals, I believe, unless I'm stating his resume wrong, was one of the camera operators or assistant directors or second unit director or something on Apocalypse Now as well.
Wow.
Well, supposedly he shot from the helicopter. He shot that scene.
That's what I thought. I think he shot the surfers.
In the morning. That scene. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it is. You continue to keep this streak going, Lamont, as Rob and I make our way through these episodes of being a really A-level guest. I mean, you're not a guest star actor, you're an actor, but in this guest star role, like, you were so good. And what the thing I thought was your strongest, your best secret weapon was your ability to be silent. There were moments of intensity where it wasn't dialogue driven, that it was like thought driven or reaction driven. And I thought you just did such a great job of bringing a cinematic weight to the character that could have easily been sort of blown off and made light in a TV way.
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I definitely wanted to do it justice. So I spent a lot of time prepping for that. I mean, my love for the blues, my love for Robert Johnson. Obviously, I had, watched some of the episodes prior to the show. So I wanted to make sure that I showed up prepared and doing my very best. And it's, you guys invited me here, which I appreciate. So it obviously is lasting in some way. And
it is, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're talking about Steve Boyum. If you don't mind me following up something on that, that we know that moment. What was the rest of your experience like working with Steve? Did anything stand out about that experience?
That was probably, the whole experience was amazing, but that was a moment to me that was just defining, because as an actor, I had been in town for 5 years, I think, something like that. This was like a big deal. I was being traveled somewhere to play this role that they were looking for this character, an actor to portray this individual for a long time, I guess, from what I understand. So that was, I think, one of the key moments, because I kind of felt like I grew up a little bit in that moment as an actor on set.
Yeah.
But as far as working with him, it was just it was a seamless experience. The entire crew and cast and everyone was fantastic. From
that's great. Did you get to meet Jensen and Jared at all?
I did not. No, I felt like I was doing a different movie in that sense.
Oh, trippy! Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
It was, it was shot like almost like a different movie. I mean, the color was a little different, and the look of it was great. Your period costumes were great. That must have been a fun fitting.
Absolutely. It was an experience, man. It was one of my most coveted and loved working experiences as an actor.
That's awesome.
Even just being in Canada. I grew up in Detroit, so I've always had a love for Canada. Going over to Windsor as a kid, Then, once I got into high school, going over there because you could be, 17 and, as I remember, I could be wrong and get a beer over there or.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah, something like that. So I spent a lot of time going under the tunnel and over the bridge to Canada. So here's a chance to go back on the West Coast or the left coast and do what I love to do. I mean, it was an amazing experience, man. Everything was just like top notch,
I bet it was fun to go over there for something other than just the beer.
Yeah, the beer, and they had just opened up a casino over there in Windsor, and there was gentleman clubs and things of that sort that individuals would go. I'm not saying me, but individuals would go over there.
Sure. People, Yeah. No, they had definitely. It's there's a lot to do, a lot to get in trouble doing. In Canada.
Absolutely.
I can't help but think that Jerry Wanick, the production designer of the show, must have had a good time on your episode because he's a music fanatic as well. And if you're given the opportunity to design, like, where's Robert Johnson playing? Oh, that's a great assignment for somebody who loves music as much as he does. And that must have really, walking into that space must have helped you solidify all the research you've done. Because here you are in the costume. And it does matter. I know we all know as actors, like, you put on the hat and the suit, it informs your body. It tells a story and helps you tell your story even better. 100%. And then that's set.
I feel like there was a time where I used the word blacked out, but I was so in tune with what was in front of me. And that's a testament and a credit to, to the production designer, to the costumer, to everyone, because when I walked in that juke joint, I mean, it was extremely authentic. I was back in in the 1930s. I mean, it was so authentic, and the casting, even the background casting was, you looked out in that audience, and I'm playing there, and you're transported.
Right.
So it was amazing. Yeah. They made it very easy to settle into that character, to settle into Robert Johnson and allow for the work that, the work and the writing, to come to life.
That's great, man. Well, it is inspired work, and what a great interview this is. You're a great guy, and we really appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
I have a one button question that's off topic a little bit, but you may have the coolest name I've ever seen or heard. Is that your birth name? Monde Byrd, is that your birth name?
Here's a fun fact for you guys. My birth name is actually just Lamond. So I did make a change. I added the E for
change it to the world. I mean, Le Monde is the world in French.
That's awesome. Yeah. I know. I love that. It was so cool. And I also love that Bird is spelled like the birds. It's Byrd. It's super cool.
That is the actual birthday. That's
like the Byrd family in Ozark.
That's right.
Exactly.
Marty Byrd.
Lamond, this has been so great. Such a great interview. You're so great on the show and a delightful actor to talk to. Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you all so much for having me. Continued success to yours podcast. I will be listening.
Thanks.
And hats off to you all.
We'll be right back. Thanks for listening. Now, back to the episode.
What a nice guy and what a talented fella.
Sweetheart. Yeah. Really, really enjoyed talking to him.
Put a lot of work into that role and he really paid off.
Yeah. And you could tell he was dialed in. So how great too. I love that, hearing that story that he is a big fan of Robert Johnson. He was destined to play that role.
He definitely seemed like he felt like it was his calling,
Yeah. All right, let's get into the mythology of this episode.
Mythology, mythology, no, mythology.
Robert Johnson was an actual blues man born in 1911.
Did you know that he spent most of his time in Memphis, Helena, and the Mississippi Delta?
I knew about Memphis and Mississippi Delta. I didn't know Helena.
Me neither. Helena,
Montana?
Mississippi? I mean, Helena, Montana? I don't know.
Helena.
Where is Helena? Helena Handbasket?
Maybe he just someone he knew named Helena.
Wouldn't that be interesting if your name was Helena and your last name was Handbasket?
Yeah, that'd be weird.
Yeah. There is a great deal of lore and mythology surrounding Robert Johnson's Faustian deal. Some say it was a deal with the devil. Others, a deal with a demon. Others speculate it was a deal with an African trickster god named Legba. Some even say the location wasn't a crossroads, but a roundabout.
That's right.
But actually a graveyard.
Right. And one thing they all have in common is that Robert Johnson traded his soul to become the greatest blues man. and he seemingly mastered the guitar in an extremely short period of time.
Unlike me, who's still whittling away at Sweet Home Alabama 25 years later.
That's right.
Johnson didn't really get to enjoy fame, though. His music really wasn't recognized until after his death. He should have been more specific in his deal with the devil.
That's right.
It's his fault for not reading the fine print.
That might be true. Robert Johnson died in 1938 at the age of 27 under mysterious circumstances. No cause of death is listed on his death certificate. The site of his grave is unknown. 3 possible grave markers are located in Greenwood, Mississippi.
I think it's funny that you go to the coroner. Hey, so how'd he die? You've been, examining him for days. What's the answer? And the answer is, I don't know. You don't even put a guess down, like toenail,
unknown,
hangnail.
Yeah,
he's whatever. Not even unknown, just like blank.
Yeah. That guy, maybe not great at his job, that guy.
Yeah, we're not talking about him. He didn't make a deal with the devil to be the best coroner. Clearly.
Yeah. But the story it gives me kind of goosebumps, this whole story. You were asking Lamond about it. Why is it such a popular myth? And, there's still just so much surrounding it that's unknown that makes it, I think that's why it, gives it this myth. Mysterious.
By the way, did you know this, Rob?
Yes.
This little piece of mythology or trivia, I would say.
I did.
Because you're a musician, you should know this.
Yes.
I don't know how old you are.
I know.
But if you're under 27, you should be concerned because there have been a lot of musicians, well-known ones, who died at 27. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, and I don't know if you're under 27, Rob, but potentially you.
Wow. Thank you.
Are you 27?
First of all, thank you. But no.
You're welcome. But theoretically, if you were 26, if you were 26.
Right.
Your life hangs in the balance.
True. But I'm not, so I shouldn't be worried. However, how fascinating is that?
That's really trippy.
I always thought it was wild, too, that around the same time, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison passed away, and they all of their names start with a J.
Oh, trippy. And Brian Jones couldn't have been that far behind. He was 1969.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. Man, he's got a J in there.
Mm-hmm. And Jurt Jobain.
And Jamie Winehouse. All right.
It's time for Fun Facts!
Fun Facts!
The motel Dr. Sylvia Perlman is hiding at is the Bakersville Motel, a reference to the Sherlock Holmes story, The Hounds of Baskervilles, which features a violent, supposedly supernatural dog. I was going to ask, and I just remembered, I'm guessing the song Black Dog by Led Zeppelin must be tied into all of this as well.
Well, I know they're big on the whole Lord of the Rings stuff, and, they do a lot of that kind of... Well,
yeah, but they're also really big. They heavily borrowed, some say stole, from the old blues artists, right? And there are a lot of old blues songs about this kind of thing. So I almost wonder if they stole this idea,
Gotcha. I wouldn't. Yeah. You might be right. That makes sense.
Say there was like these black dogs came to,
Yeah, anyway. You might be right. Interesting. Robbie, did you know that this is the first time we meet a Crossroads demon in the show?
Is that right?
And that's why they have their red eyes. The Crossroads demons were famous for having red eyes. Reportedly, as the myth goes, that's because they stayed out late.
Oh, right.
So they were always tuckered out.
Right.
And this is before Visine was a thing. You couldn't do what you used to do. And just Visine yourself into looking like you weren't, tore up from the floor up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, The Legend of Robert Johnson is a favorite of Kripke's. It was the first screenplay he had ever attempted to write.
What happened? He tried to write it and he got hit by a car? I bet he wrote it. And then, I feel like attempted to write is like, I tried to write it, but then my hand broke. And then I tried again, and the pen ran out of ink. And then I tried again. I just gave up.
Maybe the Crossroads demon was like, sorry, no, this is my story. I have rights to it.
I'll make a deal with you. You write a great screenplay, and I'll take your soul. Pass.
This is something kind of funny that I wrote down in my notes. First of all, there's a MySpace joke. And the MySpace joke in it is like, Dean doesn't know what MySpace is, so he's old.
Oh, right. Yeah. Dean's old. He is old.
So, but it's like a joke. It's dated on dated, that joke.
Yeah, exactly. It's full circle.
Yeah.
Meta dated.
Exactly. The other thing is there's a scene where Dean is kicking in doors and Sam stops him. He's like, hey, it's open. It's kind of funny. The door's open. He doesn't need to kick it in. without going too much into it, Jensen tells a really funny story. Then in real life, at one point, he needed to get a door open that was he was like locked out of his hotel room or something like that. Do you remember that story?
No.
And he couldn't get into it, and the hotel wasn't helping him. So he was like, well, he'll just kick it in like he does on the show. He's like, I've done this a million times. And he like goes and he kicks it and like nearly falls over because it's so incredibly hard to do. He's like, come on, I played Dean Winchester. I can kick a door open. So he had to truly kick a door open, and he of course knocked him over.
Had to have hip replacement surgery.
Yeah, exactly.
Hilarious.
Well, this was a fun episode. It was nice to get both those guys on, and
great to have two guests, man. Two powerhouse guests.
Yeah. So thank you for listening.
You're welcome, buddy. And thank you for talking.
You're welcome. And also thanks to all of the people listening to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you all. It's been great doing this for you, and I know you're enjoying it because I can tell by your smiles. And we want you to keep enjoying it. So please like us, follow us, and tell your friends about us. And remember, liking and following and listening is, as always, free.
That's right. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. This episode of Supernatural features Jared Padalecki as Sam Winchester and Jensen Ackles as Dean Winchester.
Guest stars include Monde Byrd, John Lafayette, Jeanette Sousa, and Evan Hudson.
Crossroad Blues was written by Sarah Gamble and directed by Steve Boyum.
Editing by Anthony Pinker. Music by Christopher Leonards.
Executive produced by Eric Kripke and Robert Singer.
The original broadcast of this episode featured the following songs: Crossroad Blues by, you guessed it, Robert Johnson. Downhearted Blues by Sunhouse.
Key to the Highway by Little Walter, and Hair of the Dog by Nazareth.
This episode originally aired on November 16th, 2006.
This episode of Supernatural Then and Now was hosted and executive produced by Richard Spade Jr. and Rob Benedict.
Produced by Stephen Hine, written by Stephen Hine and Haida Holscher.
And edited and associate produced by Trey Booty.
What's up, Booty?
Music provided by Tim Wynn.
The episode was recorded with the help of Sonic Fuel Studios.
This podcast is from Story Mill Media.
Follow the podcast on Instagram and Twitter at SPN Then and Now.
They learn that after doing the deal with George the Demon, which is coming to NBC this fall. They learned that after doing the deal with George, the demon stuck around Lloyd's and did more deals. Wait, hold on. Hold on. We got a real shortage of commas here. The brothers learned that Evan sold his...
Here's an interesting question. Is this just a typo by Steve, or are demons considered to be male? Only because it says he does a deal to save Evan in exchange for him to release the demon. Oh, for Dean to release the demon.
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay, never mind. I misread it. Shockingly, I misread it.
Well, George the Demon.
George the Demon. Wah, wah, wah. You'll be possessed by laughter. JC. I just called you my wife's name. Rob.
We're gonna unpack that later on.
Kripke says hey to all you guys. So,
oh, good.
That's nice.
Are you up there doing the boys right now?
No, doing Gen V.
Gen V.
Oh, yeah.
His new show.
Yeah,
awesome.
Great.
Story Mill Media.